because it gives a power to the minister that only Parliament should have. Only Parliament is empowered to raise taxes under our Constitution. That is a power that cannot be delegated to a minister, and 7.4 unconstitutionally does delegate that power to the minister. So we will continue with Part B of our application. Then, to start with Paul's question, we have yet to receive a formal written settlement offer from the minister. The minute we see what is in a formal written settlement offer, we will know what he is asking and what he expects the DA to do. What we will not do is withdraw Part B of our application, because it is a very important point to get an order of court stating that only Parliament can raise taxes. So that's important. But we will wait to see what the minister is proposing before we give any categorical answer on how we will respond to it. As I say, we are anticipating this, but we are still a nose lengths away from the finishing line. Then the question is, what next for the GNU? As people probably have noticed by now, we have a very strange coalition government. There's no precedent for what goes down in South Africa's coalition government anywhere in the world. No other coalition government in a country that has a proportional representation system would have survived what this coalition government so far has survived. For example, the ANC ignores the statement of intent every day. It pushes ahead with very major proposals, including this VAT increase, without seeking to get sufficient consensus with its major coalition partner. When we've made it clear we're not going to support it, the ANC goes to parties outside of the coalition to see if they can win a majority to get through the Portfolio Committee and to get through Parliament. And in fact, they did, but by what were clearly very devious means, by making the smaller party believe that they were going to withdraw the 0.5% VAT increase, when in fact, after that promise, the minister's own affidavit to a court, which I've read earlier, made it very clear they were not going to withdraw the 0.5% VAT increase. So it was clearly a question of deceiving the smaller parties that are outside the coalition to get their vote to pass this VAT increase. And so the deception all around is quite mind-boggling. And in most coalitions anywhere in the world, that level of undermining would be fatal to any coalition. In South Africa, we have to have thicker skins than normal. We have to expect the unexpected. We have to pave ways in contexts which don't even exist in other societies. It is not my position to say whether or under what circumstances the GNU should continue. What was at question was whether it should continue after what the ANC did in negotiating with parties outside of the coalition during the votes on the fiscal framework in the Portfolio Committee and in Parliament. And that was a major question. But we decided that we would still win this round, as our court case indicated we were set to do, which is what has forced the minister to want to negotiate a settlement now. So what the future is going to be for the GNU is something that I cannot categorically answer now. A lot will depend on what happens today. There's no doubt that the ANC and the smaller parties will be holding a press conference to triumph the championing of these kinds of discussions and negotiations, as if that is what led to the minister backing down when last week he said he categorically wasn't going to do so. And that also raises the question. We were set to meet the ANC this morning in Johannesburg at 11. Just before midnight last night, I got a notification from Fikile Mbalula that the meeting today at 11 that was scheduled in Johannesburg had been cancelled at short notice, and then that the minister and the ANC were going to be holding a press conference with smaller parties outside the GNU. Now that in itself is extraordinary. It is simply extraordinary. There's no other way to frame it. What we have been asking for since the very beginning of the mooted VAT increase is now coming to pass. The minister has conceded that we were right in our arguments from the beginning, and yet he seeks to undermine his major coalition partner by holding a press conference with parties outside the coalition to claim victory on a point that we have been fighting for since the very beginning, and to claim victory on a point that they did not support when the vote came to the Portfolio Committee or to Parliament. They, in fact, supported the VAT increase. So you cannot put all of these ironies into one coherent political space. It is one contradiction after another. And most certainly, depending on what comes out of the press conference today, we are now scheduled to have the meeting with the ANC tomorrow, and I have no doubt that all of these developments will be on the agenda. If you read the EFF's court papers, they primarily add to ours by arguing that the support of the smaller parties in the Portfolio Committee and in Parliament was based on a deliberate deception. That the ANC had deliberately deceived the smaller parties into believing that they would be prepared to drop the 0.5% VAT increase when that was never their intention. And in fact, the EFF points to the fact that the minister had insisted that the 0.5% VAT increase continue in his replying affidavit last Thursday, and yet the smaller parties had voted for the fiscal framework in the Portfolio Committee and in Parliament on the express understanding that they believed the minister would reconsider it. And on that basis, the EFF argued that there was a clear deception which was an unlawful exercise of public power. That was the EFF's case. And I think it was a very important argument because it continues to expose how the ANC deals with its partners in whatever forum. Now, these weren't their partners in the Government of National Unity, or not entirely. Obviously, the PA was there, and the IFP and a couple of other parties also agreed to support the fiscal framework, and they are in the Government of National Unity, but also parties that are not in the Government of National Unity. And it's important that this level of deception, which happens repeatedly, is also exposed to the voting public of South Africa, because coalitions are based on a foundation of mutual trust. And the big problem is we have to operate in a very low trust environment. There's very low trust environment inside the ANC, but that also makes a trust environment between the ANC and its coalition partners very, very difficult to establish. And the EFF's papers make it very clear as to why there's a low trust environment, because people get deliberately duped and then take decisions on the basis of misinformation that then turns out not to be the case. And so that was an important contribution by the EFF to this particular case. We were arguing the constitutional arguments primarily. They were arguing the deliberate misinformation and misleading argument, and that being an unlawful exercise of public power. So those two arguments dovetailed well, and that is why they joined our case. Now, can Action South Africa lay claim to a victory? Well, they no doubt will try, and they will no doubt be helped by the ANC to do that sometime this morning, later on this morning, which is, I'm sure, the purpose of this press conference they're having, or at least one of the purposes. But then they will have to answer the question, why did all their discussions, and almost all of them were before last Thursday, why did that have absolutely no impact on the position that the minister laid before the court, that the VAT increase was going ahead and that it would be in the rates bill and that it would be effective from May the 1st. That is what the minister makes categorically clear last Thursday, after all his discussions had happened and after the misleading of the smaller parties had already happened in March before the vote on the fiscal framework.